Hello, YouTube. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Have you ever heard of that? That's the line from Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. How do you feel when someone says your name? They call you by your name. Becky, John, Nancy, Mark, William, Jasprit, Jose, Rosalinda. Studies show that our names are essentially wired to respond in a highly engaged manner when we hear our names called out. I've heard mothers call their children by their full name when they're angry or trying to get their kids' attention. Nathan Bryan Parker, Becky Lynn Jones, get over here. Did your parents ever do that to you? My parents never called me by my full name like that. Who remembers the late Dale Carnegie? He wrote that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He said in his book, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Do you have difficulty remembering names? I do. I can be somewhere at a party, get together, picnic, get introduced to somebody or meet somebody. They tell me their name, and I tell you, if you would ask me moments later what that person's name was, chances are I probably would have forgotten it. Dale Carnegie said in that same book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, he said, most people don't remember names for the simple reason that they don't take the time and energy necessary to concentrate and repeat and fix names indelibly in their minds. They make excuses for themselves. They are too busy. That's something to ponder. And a couple other excerpts from his book about names. Franklin D. Roosevelt knew that one of the simplest, most obvious, and most important ways of gaining goodwill was by remembering names and making people feel important. Yet how many of us do it? Good question. And then here's another quick story. Benton Love, chairman of Texas Commerce Bankshares, believes that the bigger a corporation gets, the colder it becomes. One way to warm it up, he said, is to remember people's names. The executive who tells me he can't remember names is at the same time telling me he can't remember a significant part of his business and is operating on quicksand. What do you think of that? People's names, remembering names. Our names, it gives us what? A sense of identity. It's a reflection of our culture, family, and history, and can give us a feeling of belonging. It's our social identity. It's the way people identify us. Hi, I'm Diane Smith. Nice to meet you. Hello, I'm Fred Jones. Nice to meet you. And so it's the way that we first know somebody is by their name. And when I was in the Army, we all had a name tag. Our name, U.S. Army and our rank. Our rank used to be on our collar, and then they changed it to where we have our rank on the center of our uniform. And I got used to just calling people by their last name because you just had their name tag right in front of you all the time. Smitty, Mo, Jonesy. I just called them by their last name. My last name, Bukovic. So my nickname was Buko, Buki. Or one time when I was a sergeant, they would call me Sergeant Bivouac. You know what bivouac is? It's a short stay in the field. You don't necessarily have a tent or anything, but you're just staying temporarily out in the field, and it's called a bivouac. The soldiers are out bivouacking. So they would call me Sergeant Bivouac. I thought it was funny. Now, sometimes commanders, I can remember company commanders, especially if I was talking to them privately, would address me by my first name. And I always liked that. It was more personable. So they would do that on occasion. But I got to thinking, wouldn't that be interesting is if we all had a name tag like we had in the Army? Say we all just put on our shirt your first name or on your jacket. And it makes us, I think it would personalize us or humanize us. And I think that would be a great conversation starter. Imagine if you're out in the grocery store or standing in line at the post office and everybody's got their name tag. You're standing there, you may look at somebody. David, huh? My grandfather's name was David. Start a conversation. Or you see somebody, Caitlin, well, that's my name, but I spell my name with a C. See that? A relationship could start out of that. So what do you think? Should we all just have name tags? Something to think about. It's important if we pronounce someone's name correctly. How many of you get irritated when someone mispronounces your name or misspells it? It may happen so often that you just may not even correct people. You just let it go. But when someone does say your name correctly, what does it do? It affirms you, right? It builds your self-worth when someone pronounces your name correctly. I find it interesting how people have nicknames that stuck with them throughout the years. And they'll tell the story of how somebody called them a certain name, maybe an uncle or a grandparent, and that name just stuck with them. Or you'll hear somebody say, my friends call me this. My friends just call me Judy. My friends call me Tom. Or they use their middle name because they like it better. That's always interesting. Oh, I go by my middle name, Sarah. Well, what's your first name? Nora, but I don't like it. Something like that. So it's interesting to hear what people prefer to be called or how they got their name and how oftentimes what they're called in life is not their legal name that they sign, but it's something different. So yes, everybody I think should have a name tag. And what a great way to start a conversation because we see their name. Names have meanings. Names have meanings, and a name has a meaning. I can remember years ago learning about the name Barnabas. That's when I was still church going, and they would name characters in the Bible and what their name meant. And one that stuck out was Barnabas. You know what Barnabas means? Son of encouragement. That's a nice name, huh? Would you like to be known as the son or daughter of encouragement? What a name. I learned today, prepping for this video, what does James mean? I never looked it up. I didn't even know. James means supplanter, or one who takes by the heel. James, isn't that interesting? Another thing I've always found interesting throughout the years is how we have nicknames for my name, James. I'll go by Jim, or Sarah, the nickname is Sally, or Robert, it's Bob, Margaret, Peggy, and go right on down the list how you have a name, but there is a nickname for it. My late father, Charles, people called him Chuck. That's him. He was a big guy, and people would just call him Big Chuck. And they made this sign for him years ago, and we had that sign outside of our house for over 50 years. And he had put that out there in the 70s, and he just called his place Big Chuck's Place, and it's how people knew our house for many, many years. And people even now even will ask me questions about the sign that I took it down years after he passed away. It was not easy to pull that sign down, but I ended up taking it down. But people still ask me about who was Big Chuck, and that was my father. That was his name. A couple years ago, I was at a Memorial Day ceremony. They had the Memorial Day parade, and it ended in the cemetery, and that's where they had some ceremonies and guest speakers. And the guest speaker a couple years ago was a Vietnam veteran. And he was telling the story of his buddy who died in front of him. And he said that his buddy's wound is what they called a sucking chest wound, an open chest wound, and they're trying to save him and seal that wound over his chest. And he said that the last thing that his friend, his fellow soldier, said to him before he died was, "Say my name." He said that to him, "Say my name." And he remembered that his whole life, and he reflected on it. What a thing to say, one of your last words. And he said that he thought that perhaps it was his way of saying, "Don't forget me. Remember me. Say my name." A name. His name. Our names. It's our identity. It's who we are. We remember names. Our towns remember our fallen. 9/11, the names are always called every year to remember their names, who they were. Well, Jim, what about your name? Your title of your video says the day your name was changed. Yes. Yes, that's right. I wasn't always a James. I didn't always go by Jim. I was adopted. I was a foster child first. And my family got me at the age of 2 years old. This picture here is of me when I was 3 years old. And on Christmas Day, we had twin goats that were born. And but I was born Junior Augustino Gomez. So my name was Junior. And in this newspaper clipping here, it says at the bottom here, it takes real live pets to make a little fellow's Christmas day complete, according to Junior, foster son of Mr. and Mrs. Charles Bukovac. And it had some other things to say there. But that was my name, Junior. And like I said, they had got me at the age of 2. And I saw many foster children coming and going from the home all those years. My parents had many foster children for many years. And they would always go back to their family, but I remained. I have a sister. She's 9 years older than me, but she wasn't adopted. She actually graduated high school and then moved out on her own before I was even adopted. Well, Jim, when did your family adopt you? They didn't adopt me until I was 11 years old. That was 1983. So I was a foster child all that time. And think of it, my name was Junior Augustino Gomez. Well, what kind of name is that? Biologically, I'm Puerto Rican. So that always made for interesting conversation in the military when they would see my last name tape. Isn't that a European name, Slovenian name? And I would say yes. And they would say, I thought you looked European. And little did they know that I was adopted. That's my adopted name. It's amazing how people just assume when they look at your name or your last name, that's your real name. But I think many people who are adopted can relate to that. What I want to say in this video is that my name, having been called Junior for so many years, and then when they adopted me in 1983, it was December 16th, the day before my birthday. Isn't that interesting? And then the following day was my birthday is December 17th. And this is a picture of me and my mom on that day, December 17th, 1983, the day after my adoption. And so they decided to have an adoption/birthday party for me. And that's my adopted mother. And you can see she was a big lady, and she was taking different medications. One of them was prednisone, where it makes you retain water and gain weight, and you can see it in the picture. And she ended up passing away at the age of 45. She was young, and I spent a good time taking care of her. in my in those years, and then into my teens as well, helping take care of her. Now, interestingly, her birthday was the same day as mine. She too was born December 17th, but in 1944. So, isn't that interesting? The woman who adopted me, that our birthdays by chance would be on the same, fell on the same day. So that when we celebrated our birthdays, we always shared a birthday cake. And the day of my adoption was such a special time for her. And she even mentioned that she felt that she could have easily have just given birth to me. And what a gift, on her birthday, to, officially adopt me. So I'm very grateful that I had parents to do that. I still know my birth mother. She actually lives only a couple miles from me. So I grew up, even I was a foster child, I still had visitation with my birth mother. So I still know her to this day. My birth father I never knew. He died when I was young, tragically killed. Him and his brother were shot and killed, and a third brother was wounded. They were at their sister's graduation party of all places. And so tragedy that happened there. I don't want to tell the story behind that. Maybe I'll tell it a different day, but that's how come I never knew my birth father. So I share that in that, well, why are you sharing this, Jim? Well, I share it because when people ask me, Jim, what's your name? I'm caught between two names. Junior, my birth name, that I grew up being called for so long. And then when I was adopted, they changed my birth name completely to James Anthony Bukovic Jr. Now get this. They added the junior at the end of my name because that used to be my birth name. It's not because there's a senior. How many people do you know with that kind of a situation? So there's no senior, but I have junior on the back of on my last part of my name as a remembrance of my name before. And so people I grew up with, neighbors, some classmates, friends of the family, I can go visit them now and they'll still call me Junior. And when I'm out in public, and if I happen to hear the name Junior, I perk up immediately. I hear it. I hear it. And in the Puerto Rican culture, Junior is a common first name. When you hear the word Junior, you think of it as, a little child, or, you just assume that there's a senior. But Junior is like a name like John or Peter. So I was called Junior. I was named Junior. And so, and I, in school, of course, you signed your name on all your school papers. And I can remember after my official adoption how challenging that was to remember, oh, my name's different now. I've got to sign my name as James on my school papers. And so I still struggle to this day in my name. And with my name being Junior before, and then adopted, and then changed to James. And then I bounced back and forth between James and Jim. And then I'll have people say, well, what do you prefer to be called? And sometimes I'll say James is fine, or I just like the way they say the name James. Or if they say it, I was like, well, just call me James. um, and I thought, well, James, is it has a good historical background to it with some distinction, like in the Bible, the name James is there. So there's been some famous James. So I would go by James, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll just go to Jim as a more casual nickname. And so I bounced back and forth between James and Jim. And in the military, it was always my rank and last name. So I didn't really use the first name much in the Army that much. It was either sergeant or lieutenant, and then later Captain B, Captain Bukovac, sir. And so I have two identities. My family identity growing up as a junior, and then in my professional life, they know me as James, Jim, Mr. So and so, or Captain so and so. They know me there. And I still have this friction to this day in me, in my name. And so, but I'm proud to have the name. They named me, my adopted parents named me after their family. James being my adopted mother's, my adopted grandfather's name. Anthony was my dad's father, middle name. Then Bukovac, my last name, and then they threw Junior on because that was my name before. Isn't that an interesting story there? And I just, because it's such a unique thing, and I share it. And so perhaps maybe there's others out there in a similar situation. I know I've run into many adopted people. And so it's just interesting to talk to people who have been adopted, who have been in the foster care system. I have a heart for people who are foster parents. I have a lot of respect for people who open their home to other children. A lot of respect for that. And for those who also then adopt, have children of their own, but then also adopt children. Or a couple, an older couple, who perhaps children have grown, but yet they decide that they still have more love to give and adopt a child. And so much, much respect for people like that. And in this world of ours of debate on abortions and all this and that, I don't like to get too wrapped around and get heated in that debate. But in my humble opinion, I think adoption is a great option. Many famous people have been adopted. Steve Jobs. I think even Jeff Bezos were adopted kids. Think of that. And if you ever have a chance to listen to Steve Jobs' 2005 commencement speech on YouTube, give it a listen. He tells the story of being adopted. It's very moving. It's very moving. So, what's in a name? Your name. I'm proud of my name. I'm proud to carry my last name, my adopted family's last name. I think I did it well. Uphold your family name. That old country song. I think it was Aaron Tippin. You got to stand for something. That song, I think that's a great song. And he says up in there, uphold your family name. And I think I did it well. The name. And so maybe it's a blessing I have two names, two families. Some people hardly have one. So I have to be thankful for that. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share. And so I guess the takeaway is, let's try to start calling people by their name, pronouncing it correctly, asking people what's their name, start a conversation. And when we meet people, do the best we can to remember their name. Remember their name. And as, Dale Carnegie said, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Well, that is all. Thanks for watching. Until the next one, take care.